I never imagined being denied boarding would lead to a life-changing reckoning for an airline. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was thick with anxiety and desperation as I stood at the gate, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel my breath quickening, a tightness clawing at my throat. They said the flight was overbooked, but how could that be? The bright lights of the terminal reflected the anxious faces surrounding me, all waiting for the same answer, yet nobody had it. My hands trembled as I clutched my boarding pass, the flimsy piece of paper now a cruel reminder of my dashed hopes. I glanced at the flight attendant's face, a mask of indifference. What could possibly be so important that someone would be left behind? It felt like a twist of fate, ripple effects of a decision made by someone else. I thought of my family waiting for me on the other end. The smell of freshly baked pastries wafting through the airport made my stomach twist with longing. I had planned everything, and yet here I was, a ghost among the bustling travelers. My brain raced. I replayed the trend of missed connections, the stories shared by weary souls who had faced the same fate. This was a huge airline. How could they let their customers down like this? I could hear whispers floating around, rumors of broken systems, of greed that overshadowed humanity. The atmosphere buzzed with uncertainty, each moment pregnant with possibilities. Would my family think I chose to abandon them? Would my friends understand the chaos of this moment? Time slowed as I witnessed a man collapse in despair a few feet away, his cries echoing through the terminal like a siren call. I felt the weight of fear seep into my bones. Each second stung like ice, chilling me to the core. The people were looking, eyes wide with shock, their expressions raw. I could feel a collective judgment weighing down, heavy and suffocating. Their murmurs filled the air, a mix of sympathy and disdain for me, for them, for the entire broken system. Suddenly, an announcement crackled over the intercom. The words were not soothing. My heart raced again, panic swirling through me as I listened intently. Talk of changes in policy and ongoing investigation sent chills down my spine. What was happening? Was it even just about our flight, or was this just the tip of an iceberg that threatened to capsize all of us? Everyone held their breath. I watched as some passengers began to scream, their voices a chorus of chaos. I stood frozen, caught between simultaneously wanting to scream and run. As the shadows lengthened, I realized this wasn't merely a delay. This was unraveling into something deeper, an unraveling of trust. What did a simple boarding denial mean in the grand scheme of it all? Had we all just become pawns in a game we didn't even know was being played? My heart raced with questions as I stared into the uncertainty of what this would lead to. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The weight of despair settled over me like a fog, thick and choking. With each breath, I felt the urgency of the moment pulse through me, driving me to act, to connect or reach out to the other souls caught in this whirlwind. Yet, I was paralyzed by the fear of uncertainty looming before us, glaring with implications far beyond a simple flight cancellation. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a woman clutching a small child, her composure cracking under the pressure. She swung back and forth in an attempt to soothe the tiny human in her arms, cooing soothing words that seemed to bounce off the immovable wall of chaos around us. My heart went out to her. She reminded me of my own little sister. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Do you need help?" It was an impulsive offer, a spark of connection amidst the emotional carnage. "Thank you," she replied, her voice thick. "I thought we'd finally be on our way to see my parents." I nodded, understanding the heartbreak wrapped around her words. In that moment, we were united by a shared pain, two strangers desperate for relief, clutching onto the frayed edges of hope. She seemed to draw strength from it, and I could feel a spark of warmth seep into my chest. As we chatted, her child's little fingers twisted tightly around her hair, a sign of their shared desperation. But then, something beautiful unfolded. A young man close by, who had been scrolling through his phone, suddenly stepped forward. "I might be on a different flight, but can I help? I have some snacks if you need to distract her." The gesture brought a smile to the woman's face, a fragile bloom in the shadow of despair. "Thank you so much. It means a lot." We were cut off from the world outside the airport walls, enveloped in our collective struggle, but in small moments like these, glimmers of kindness shone through. What could have become another story of rejection turned into acts of empathy. Each slow second opened up the possibility that we were not merely victims. We could also choose to stand together and support one another. Yet, as moments of peace blossomed, stark realities loomed like uninvited shadows at the edges of our gathering. An announcement blared again in the distance, echoing throughout the terminal, announcing mandatory protocols. The phrase sent shivers down my spine. Why did it feel like a storm was brewing, just beyond the horizon? I glanced nervously at the woman beside me, the flicker of anxiety in her eye mirroring my own. Behind us, a heated argument erupted. A man, his face twisted in rage, confronted a gate agent, demanding accountability. "I have a family waiting. This is unacceptable." His spiraling frustration seemed ready to lash out beyond the immediate situation, tapping into an unresolved bitterness that floated in the air like poison. I watched as other passengers began to murmur, the discontent bubbling beneath the surface boiling into something toxic. I wished fervently for clarity and connection, yet the fear of chaos threatened to consume us. That very man, previously united with us in our sorrow, became an embodiment of frustration simmering between despair and anger. He was not alone. Many shared his sentiment, glancing nervously toward the agents behind the counter, waiting for an explanation that felt long overdue. But that wasn't what cracked the armor of hope built between the woman and me. It was an unexpected announcement, a single phrase that shattered the already brittle atmosphere. Due to ongoing investigations of our airline's practices, reconsideration of policies is being put into effect immediately. Passengers will need to remain patient, and any flight affected is subject to erratic decisions. The words twisted in my gut. What did it mean for all of us? There lingered the weight of possibility, the realization that this was bigger than a lost boarding pass or a missed family reunion. As fear began to envelop me again, I could sense the other passengers reacting, their faces solidifying into masks of concern and uncertainty. In that moment, the veil of humanity I felt earlier began to fray. This wasn't merely about an isolated negligence anymore. It was systemic, a reflection of the inherent flaws in a system designed to serve us, now unraveling before our eyes. I looked back to the woman beside me, seeking a lifeline of reassurance, but all I saw was the mirror of confusion and dread. What emerged was not just the culmination of our individual struggles. It was a collective realization that we were part of something larger, a system that could no longer ignore its own cracks. And within that swirling tempest of emotions, I felt a shiver of dread. Would the chaos roll through our lives like a tidal wave, leaving hearts shattered in its wake? Then, without warning, an explosion of sound burst forth. From the glint of my periphery, I saw its security rushing past, heading towards the confrontation at the gate. My heart raced. Something was shifting, something impending that would change the very course of this chaotic day and perhaps the lives intertwined within it. As I locked eyes with the woman, I could see the same pulse of despair mirrored in her gaze. What would come next? Was our determination to face this storm together enough? The uncertainty loomed, darker and more enigmatic, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of something profound and unexplainable, unsure whether to hope for rescue or brace for impact. The chaos surged around us like a riptide, dragging us deeper into uncertainty. I felt my heart constrict as I watched the security team converge on the angry passenger, whose voice had morphed from a cry of anguish to a primal scream demanding justice. The atmosphere crackled with an unnameable tension, like the air before a summer storm. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of reckoning was about to unfold, not just for the airline, but for all of us caught in its turbulent wake. The woman beside me gripped her child tighter, the small body a fragile shield against the unpredictability of the world. "Mommy, I'm scared," the little voice whispered, echoing the sentiments of so many. It was a mere child's question, but the depth of its simplicity struck me. The enormity of her worry reflected back at me in that small, innocent face. What were we even protecting them from? "I know, sweetheart," she replied, her voice cracking. "But we're going to be okay. Just hold on to my hand." It was a natural instinct, taking solace in a familiar anchor, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't okay at all. The situation was escalating, and our moments of connection seemed to be increasingly overshadowed by rising anxieties. As I turned back to face the scene unfolding at the gate, a security officer broke away from the throng, their expression focused and serious. "Everyone, please remain calm. We are addressing the situation now. We ask that all passengers stay where they are." The words were meant to provide reassurance, but the tightening grip of dread wove its way through the room, as palpable as the tension in the air. Suddenly, as if in defiance of the looming distress, the stranger with snacks reappeared in front of the woman. "Hey, sorry for bothering you all again, but my flight's delayed too. Want me to watch your little one while you take a breather?" The crack in his voice betrayed his own fear, but his attempt to help offered a flicker of kindness that shone brightly amid the shadows. The woman hesitated, caught in the crosshairs of fear and instinct. Would she trust him? Would she take the chance for a moment free of stress? "Please," I urged gently. "It might do you good to take a moment to breathe, just to catch your thoughts." I saw her apprehension flicker, but sink beneath the surface of desperation. She nodded, blinking rapidly as tears threatened to spill over once more, and in moments, she was stepping away, allowing the stranger to cradle her child, holding them with a tenderness that cracked the air like a sunflower fighting for sunlight through cracks in brick. With a deep breath, I stepped close to her, my hand resting on her shoulder. "Just breathe," I whispered. "We'll be here when you're ready." And then, the tension that choked me dissipated just slightly, as her grateful smile broke through the shadows, a quiet testament to the resilience shared among those who were suffering. But that brief moment of hope was quickly tossed aside, as the multitude of murmuring voices intensified. The man whose anger had set everything into chaos began to yell again, this time launching accusations at the security personnel. "What do you mean you're addressing it? How long do we have to wait? This is unacceptable." His rage filled the air, contagious, and soon others were echoing his sentiments, their grievances spilling over like water overflowing from an old bucket. Beside me, the woman returned to her child, her eyes wide with uncertainty, the moment of peace shattering around her. It was undeniable. Anger and fear were gaining ground as the crowd turned restless, a collective grief manifesting into anger against a faceless bureaucracy. Tension spiraled. Voices rose in unison, a choir of desperation aching to be heard, to be respected. It occurred to me how quickly connection could devolve into discord, how fragile our humanity was when strife threatened to strip us of our dignity. As I tried to grasp the magnitude of what was happening, something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. A small group of airline representatives stepped forward, holding up their hands, pleading for calm. Just then, another blast echoed through the terminal, a sudden deafening bang stirring the air. My heart lurched. Everything momentarily froze, faces turning from frustration to fear. What had just happened? My eyes darted to the security team, and I could see their tense expressions. They rushed to the edge of the throng, nerves crackling like static electricity around us as they scrutinized the scene, their earlier call for calm now drowned beneath escalating chaos. "Stay back. Everyone, step away from the scene," one shouted. A ripple of confusion spread across the crowd, fear generating more fear. I clutched my chest, heart pounding loudly in my ears. What did that noise signify? Was it a gunshot? An explosion? The uncertainty latched onto my throat, squeezing tightly, while the crowd teetered between flight and fight instincts. As I turned back to the woman, my heart crashed at the sight of her eyes wide in terror, the child clinging to her leg, their world collapsing into a whirlwind of panic. "Stay close," I cried, reaching out for them instinctively. But my voice was lost, drowned beneath the sea of mounting anxiety surging through the terminal. A moment later, I felt the ground shift beneath me as the situation erupted into full chaos. A sense of impending doom was flooding through the air, and in that instant, I realized we were not merely witnesses. We were now participants in a life-changing reckoning that none of us had imagined. But the question remained, would it bring us together or tear us apart? And as I clung to that fleeting faint spark of hope amidst tumultuous dread, I could do nothing but wait, desperate for a flicker of light to guide us through the darkness that was closing in. In the moments that followed the thundering bang, the airport descended into chaos. Confusion reigned as panicked passengers surged towards the exit doors, a stampede instinctively driven by fear. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, uncertain whether to follow the tide of frantic bodies or to stay anchored next to the woman and her child. "Stay here. Don't move," I shouted, though I couldn't be sure if she heard me over the deafening cacophony. The child wrapped their arms around their mother's legs, their small frame coiling tighter like a frightened rabbit. For a moment, I could see the mother's face twist in anguish, a silent wrestling match of instinctive protection fighting against her rising terror. Then, out of the turmoil, a voice rose above the commotion, commanding yet soft. "Everyone, please, this way. We need to move away from the walls." It was a young airline employee, a wiry figure with dark hair and wide, expressive eyes, ushering the passengers toward the center of the terminal. "Follow her," I urged, as a siren echoed through the chaos, urgency filling the air with unseen terror. I took a step toward the young woman as she bounced through the crowd, her presence a beacon amidst the confusion. "Come on." The woman nodded, gripping her child's hand tightly, as we instinctively trailed the employee. People around us began to herd together, some openly crying, others shouting in disbelief, torn between wanting to escape and the need to remain connected to loved ones. "Stay close," I whispered to the mother as I grasped the little boy's shoulder, offering a sense of stability. "We'll get through this." With each step, the light dimmed around us, as if the very air itself had grown heavier. The soft glow of the overhead lights flickered intermittently, creating a strobe-like effect that disoriented anyone caught beneath it. My heart raced. This was not just an incident. It felt like a waking nightmare. Suddenly, the employee halted. "Here. We'll form a line here for safety," she urged, guiding us into a quieter alcove, away from the glass walls and the swirling chaos outside. The din began to recede slightly, though hysteria still gripped the air, fueling alienation amidst the crowd. As we filed into the alcove, I noticed another passenger, a stooped older man who was pale, perspiration slicking his brow, clutching onto a cane as if it were a lifeline. He trembled visibly, and a bond of compassion flickered to life within me. Without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder, grounding him with a gentle squeeze. "You okay?" I asked, watching as his startled eyes found mine, gauging my sincerity. "I don't know. I just wanted to go home," he stuttered, his voice shaky yet fortified by the weight of his truth. "We're all scared, but we're together now," I replied. Let's stick together. He nodded, eyes welling up, the flicker of connection warming the cold despair that enveloped us. That glimmer intertwined with the frantic energy of shared humanity, like vibrant threads woven together in a net to secure the fragile hope we all needed right now. Amid the uneasy tension, the young employee spoke again, her voice pulling taut with determination. I need everyone to stay calm. We're waiting for information from security. I promise we will make sure you all are safe. I tried to cling to her words like a lifeline. The notion of safety felt elusive at that moment, like smoke slipping through my fingers. But I watched as people around us found tiny pockets of connection, whispers of reassurance shared between strangers, small gestures of kindness sparking like fireflies in a raging storm. Then, amidst all that uncertainty, the child looked up at me with big round eyes, innocence untouched by dread. Are we going to be okay? They asked, a hesitant tremor in their voice, a mirror reflecting back the weight of adult worries. Of course, we are, I responded, kneeling down and forcing a smile that I hoped would bridge the chasm of fear. Look at all these brave people. We'll be all right, I promise. The child nodded, but I saw the flicker of hesitation linger. And in that fragile moment, I felt a pang of guilt. What right did I have to assure them when uncertainty rattled me to the core? Just then, a loud crashing sound broke the tentative calm, causing each of us to flinch, our collective heartbeats uncertain. An announcement blasted from the overhead speakers, garbled and disjointed, the urgency rippling through my veins. Attention, please. All passengers remain where you are. We are responding to a critical situation. Please stay calm. A critical situation. The weight of those words settled over us like a lead blanket, an unspoken realization that clawed at my insides. And then, much to my horror, I watched as the young employee's previously composed demeanor fractured, her face pale as she rushed back towards the entrance, where the chaos escalated. What did that mean? I looked back at the man who was again shivering, casting furtive glances around as panic washed over him. Dread pooled within me. I took one last look around our makeshift refuge, cringing as I sensed the brewing storm of emotions. What had I just asked this child to trust? And as I fought to keep hope alive within the darkening confines of my mind, and for all of us in that nightmarish expanse, a shocking revelation simmered beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. The alcove felt more like a prison than a sanctuary, as the oppressive atmosphere pressed in around us. The faces of the passengers bore expressions somewhere between disbelief and dread, mingled with a lingering scent of fear. I turned back to the child, who still clung tightly to their mother, their wide eyes reflecting a toiling storm of emotions. Where did she go? The woman whimpered, raking her hand through her hair in a futile attempt to tame her disheveled appearance. Her voice trembled, almost lost beneath the eerie hum of anticipation that settled in. I am sure she just went for help, I said, though my voice faltered under the weight of uncertainty. Who was I trying to reassure? I felt the tremor in her grip tighten around her son, her unvoiced question sparking a ripple of anxiety through the group. Outside, the chaos grew more pronounced, sirens wailing in rapid succession, and the low rumble of distant shouting echoing through the terminal. I glanced through the glass walls, and for a brief, harrowing moment, I locked eyes with another passenger, a woman standing against the terminal windows, frantic energy coursing through her movements. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she shook her head violently, as if trying to deny some unspeakable truth. A gut-wrenching instinct spilled over me, mingling dread with compassion. I longed to reach out to bridge that distance, but I was paralyzed by the fortress of fear rising around us. Unable to help myself, I stepped closer to the wide glass, putting my hands against the cold surface as I stared into the commotion. Hey! We need to help them, I called, desperately hoping for some acknowledgement from the trembling woman. But in the blur of afraid faces, she simply turned away, overwhelmed, lost in a world that felt as surreal as it was menacing. As my heart rate quickened, I took a deep breath, wrapping my arms around the child, who had turned their gaze to me in terror. I could feel the weight of the mother's incessant worry, infecting her child's innocence as she remained rooted in her fear. "Please," she admitted, her voice small, "this was supposed to be a vacation. We were meant to go to the beach. I should have kept us safe." I felt a pang of empathy ripple through me. "You're doing the best you can right now," I said, holding her gaze. "Staying together is what matters. We will find a way through this. Look," I continued, tilting the child's chin upwards gently, forcing them to meet my eyes. "We need to focus. It's important to listen and support each other. Can you help me keep an eye on things while we wait?" The child nodded, though I noticed still the trepidation baked deep inside. Leaning back to the mother, I shared a simple smile, hoping to ignite some small flicker of hope amid the encroaching dark. Minutes felt like hours as the air grew heavy with uncertainty. Glancing around, I noticed the nervous exchanges filling the alcove. The older man had started to speak quietly to another young woman, their murmuring forming a small island of solace amidst the turmoil, a gentle reminder that in the heart of the storm, small acts of kindness could still thrive. The airline employee had not returned, and each second stretched thin, heavy with anticipation. Then, suddenly, a commotion broke out outside the alcove as more people flooded past, their eyes wide and frantic. A figure emerged, a man in a navy suit, his tie askew, face glistening with sweat, hoarsely barking commands into a walkie-talkie. "There's been an incident," he announced, his voice cutting through the haze like a razor. "Everyone must stay where you are. We need to assess the situation." The panic in the crowd surged, tangential tendrils of anxiety clawing through the air, threatening to reach the seams of the collective fabric we were weaving. Voices began overlapping, questions bubbling into cries of confusion and desperation. "Stay calm," someone shouted again, though the battle against rising chaos felt futile. A broken shard of ice lodged in my chest, my stomach knotting as primal fear curled its fingers around my heart. "Can't we just leave?" cried a voice from the back. "Why are we still here? We should run." "No! We need to listen to them," I yelled, gripping the child's hand even tighter. "Please! We must stay put. This is important." The mother's face reflected distrust, but she held her child stronger, blending her fear with a desperate need to remain steadfast. I met her eyes, silently conveying reassurance, my heart hammering against the walls of helplessness that threatened to close in. In that vulnerable fraction of time, I thought of my own journey, the difficulties I had faced in recent weeks. The isolation I felt moments ago now morphed into a shared collective bemusement, a tapestry woven from the threads of our fears, all of which felt equally immense. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum of connection, an unyielding fortress against despair. Just as I settled into the moment, hoping that perhaps a breakthrough may just come through the dark, I heard a cracking sound. The older man I had supported earlier abruptly gasped, gripping his cane so hard that his knuckles blanched white. Other passengers instinctively recoiled, and the cries of children echoed. "What is it?" I shouted, panic slipping back into my voice. But before anyone could respond, the fluorescent lights flickered violently, the world around us dissolving into darkness. A collective gasp echoed, as the world seemed to tilt on its axis, plunging our fears into a piercing quiet, dark, impenetrable, and absolute. My heart raced, thundering against the chaos that had now become unmerited, a disquieting prelude to the revelation looming just ahead. And in the chaotic shadows where hope had once flickered bright, now stood only trembling uncertainty. The darkness enveloped us, a suffocating cloak that amplified every whisper of breath, every beat of a heart thrumming with unwelcome anticipation. Confusion and fear intermingled as we stood frozen in the aftermath of the light's betrayal. I could sense the mother clutching her child, their warmth a fragile beacon in the suffocating void that filled the alcove. "There has to be a backup generator," someone shouted, their voice trembling with the undertone of panic. "We can't just stay in the dark." But the response was swallowed by the silence, broken only by the soft, barely audible cries of those who felt lost and adrift. In the flickering shadows, I caught a glimpse of the older man, his cane now a ghostly silhouette against the wall, wavering as though he too had questioned the ground beneath him. Almost instinctively, I squeezed the child's hand again, my knuckles white against the rising tide of fear. "Stay with me," I whispered, though uncertainty gnawed at me like a relentless predator. "Everything will be okay. We're together. That's what matters." Around us, hushed voices huddled together, seeking solace from one another, yet the air retained an electricity full of unspoken dread. I could feel the mother stare on me, layered with confusion and a dash of hope, though shadows masked her face. Suddenly, a single poise of light broke through the dark. It was a cell phone, illuminating the startled faces of those trapped in the alcove. A teenage girl raised it high, her other hand gripping her mother's arm tightly, as she illuminated our surroundings. I could see the kaleidoscope of emotions blurring across each face ridge, fear, defiance as they flickered under the glow. "Everyone! I can't see you!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the murmuring. "If you're okay, wave your hands so I know you're here." A ripple of movement passed through the crowd, and hesitant waves followed, fragile yet significant bursts of solidarity against the encroaching darkness. The act alone, simple yet profound, connected us. All of us were scared, and somehow we realized we weren't alone. In that moment, the air buzzed with some intangible hope, a breath that cut through the terror. But as it did, the man in the navy suit re-entered, illuminating himself in the hazy beam of the teenager's phone. His expression had changed, no longer a mere harbinger of authority, but a stricken man bound by the weight of peril. "The lights, they might not come back on," he intoned gravely, his voice trembling. "We need to evacuate the building. Please stay calm, remain in an orderly fashion, and move towards the exit." The words sank like stones in the air as the panic crescendoed once more, and for a moment, I believed the walls would cave beneath the cacophony of voices, everyone clamoring for answers, for safety, for release. "Wait!" I called out, pressing through the crowd as I struggled to find my footing. "We need to stick together. If we rush without a plan, it won't end well for anyone." A few faces turned my way, swelling with the request for clarity amidst the chaos. The mother took a small step forward, her eyes narrowing softly on me, that flicker of trust returning. There was boldness in her spirit, a warmth that seemed invisible yet persistent. "Listen," I pressed on, my heart thudding as each word poured from me. "We've made it this far by holding on to each other. If we move toward the exits as a unit, we can support anyone who falls behind. Help each other." There was a momentous small, precious pause. Hushed whispers began to trickle through our immediate group, and slowly, a tentative agreement took hold. The woman with the child nodded, her hand slipping reassuringly into mine. As we began to sway toward the entryway amidst newfound determination, another crack echoed in the distance. A shattering noise ripped through the air as a section of the wall crumbled, sending dust swirling like an unsettling omen. "Everyone! Move now!" the man in the suit shouted as unyielding panic washed over him. And just like that, the voice of cohesion was met with the raw ferocity of survival. As we forced ourselves forward, the corridor buzzed with the desperate energy of bodies tumbling on themselves. It was a powerful cascade of instincts overwhelming the fragile boldness we had mustered. But midway to the exit, I felt the yank of a small hand slipping from my grasp. I turned, my heart freezing as I watched the child stumble, fear lighting their gaze, like a candle flickering before a storm. I screamed, my adrenaline flooding through my veins as I lunged backward, fighting against the tide of bodies moving relentlessly towards what we hoped was safety. In that split second, I caught sight of the teenage girl reaching for the child, and I prayed with every fiber of my being that they would make it. But my own footing was uncertain, the pull of the crowd too powerful, too oblivious to the fragile lives that hung in the balance. With darkness swelling back around me, drowning out the hope we had forged, I braced against the wave, heart thundering, knowing that sometimes standing still was the hardest choice of all. And then a scream pierced the rushing air, one that echoed with an unmistakable clarity. As I turned to follow the sound, my breath caught in my throat. What I saw would change everything. The piercing scream echoed through the corridor, a haunting note that tugged at my very core. It was more than just a cry of fear. It resonated with the weight of despair, a sound that seemed to suspend time itself. I forced my gaze away from the chaotic sea of bodies, where the desperate throng surged toward the flickering light of safety, and back toward the aftermath of that singular voice. The child had toppled backward, caught in the clutches of the tide, yet now lay prone on the cold floor, a small, fragile figure uncertain against the encroaching shadows. My heart plummeted as I realized the woman who had been clutching the child was now scanning the crowd, her breath coming in harsh, panicked gasps. I could almost see the hope draining from her as she struggled to push past the throng. No. I shouted again, my voice swallowed by the cacophony. For a moment, everything faded into a dull roar as I fought against the relentless surge, feeling my own panic rise. But I couldn't abandon the child. I couldn't. The teenage girl was already there, kneeling beside the little one, her expression fierce. "You're going to be okay," she grunted, her voice strong as she offered a hand. The child's wide eyes darted between the girl and the chaos, confusion etched on their tiny face, their small body trembling. In one fluid motion, I broke free of the panicked crowd, propelling myself towards them. The girl had managed to grasp the child's hand, trying to coax them back to their feet. I reached them just as the child began to withdraw, shaking their head, fear tightening their features to a point of utter despair. "Grab my other hand," I urged, kneeling beside them. The floor was rough against my knees, but nothing could deter me. I extended my palm, my eyes locking onto theirs, pleading for them to trust me. "Please, we can't leave you here." A flicker of recognition danced in their eyes. With a tremor that shook the very marrow of my being, the child raised a hand toward mine, grasping it as if they were hanging by the thinnest thread. In that moment of connection, I felt a surge of warmth, the weight of their fear lessening just slightly under the strength of our shared resolve. "Together!" I yelled over the din. It was a mantra, a call, an invocation. The teenage girl moved closer, her other arm encircling the child as we stood, forming a fragile chain of solidarity in the midst of chaos. But as we turned, the ground beneath us continued to tremble, a relentless reminder that time and safety were fragile commodities in this fractured space. I could still hear the mother's frantic calls overlapping with the sounds of chaos, a longing for her child twisted with terror, each note piercing deeper than the last. "Let's go!" the teenage girl shouted with urgency, pulling the child close as we advanced. The crowd was thinning ahead, the flickering light of the exit growing closer, and yet there remained an unsettling undercurrent of urgency, one that urged caution amid the desperate dash. Yet before we could move further, I felt another tremor ripple beneath us, stronger this time, as though the very fabric of the building were unraveling. It shifted, and the walls, once calm and silent, now seemed to shudder in profound anger. "What's happening?" someone cried out from the far side of our group, a note of despair bubbling up amidst the fear. I shot a quick glance at the teenage girl, dread pooling in the depths of my stomach. "Just keep moving. We need to hurry." But as we inched forward, something unexpected emerged from the chaos. A woman, unyielding and resolute, pushed her way through the crowd. I recognized her. She had been a stranger earlier, one of the many faces filled with uncertainty. Now, she bore a determination reminiscent of the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the tumult. I can't just let those who need help behind," she yelled back, swiftly reaching for an elderly man who had fallen, eyes wide with fear. The incredible kindness took me by surprise, igniting a flicker of hope. In crisis, humanity grappled with its own darkness yet still offered threads of light. The woman's actions drew others to her, forming a chain where each person supported another, creating a bridge of resilience amidst despair. I felt my heart lift marginally, the connection of shared struggle growing into something vibrant, something that whispered of survival. But then, that hopeful moment shattered into a cacophony of trouble as the ground shook violently beneath us. Dust flooded the corridor, swirling like ghostly figures rising to claim us. I tightened my grip on the child and the girl, instinctively shielding them as the darkness seeped back into our reality. "We need to go, now," I shouted again, the urgency rising in pitch. The exit was within reach, but the wave of people surged back, the panic once again pulling us apart like a riptide. Suddenly, another scream echoed, mingled with the sound of breaking glass. My pulse raced as I instinctively turned back to see what had unfolded. A cascade of bricks fell from the ceiling just yards away, a testament to the building's decay, and amid the chaos, the old man was caught beneath them, struggle glimmering in his eyes, as he reached for the helping hands that couldn't reach him. Time froze for a heartbeat. The realization hit like an anchor pulling me under. Too many lives caught in this storm, too many choices. But one thing pressed heavy upon me as dread clawed at my heart. What if we couldn't save everyone after all? In that split second, I knew what I had to do, but as I stepped forward, pulling away from the grasp of those around me, another rumble erupted, shaking the very essence of my choice. I was faced with a choice I never imagined I would have to make, one that would bind me to the fate of those trapped and forever change the course of this night. As the treacherous tremors continued to assault our resolve, my breath caught, and before I could act, a voice pierced the darkness, declaring something that would shift the foundations of my trembling world forever. I never imagined being denied boarding would lead to a life-changing reckoning for an airline. The voice belonged to a man silhouetted against the chaos, his features contorted with a mix of dread and fury. "Whoever is in charge here, I demand to speak to you," he yelled, his command resolute. Amid the thrumming panic, it was his demand that sliced through the air with agonizing clarity. I could see the desperation in his eyes, a reflection of the turmoil binding us all together, yet so uniquely isolating. A tight knot formed in my throat. I wanted to urge him to be quiet, to focus on our escape instead of drawing attention, but there was something about his defiance that struck a chord within me. It was a kind of bravery I hadn't expected in this suffocating moment, a candle flickering against the overwhelming darkness. "Please," said the teenage girl as she pulled the child closer, who clung to her with wide, haunted eyes. "We can't waste time. We need each other to get out." Yet the man persisted, ignoring the settings around him. "You people have to do better. We'll all be trapped unless someone takes responsibility for this catastrophe." His words struck at a pain deep within me, a pain I recognized too well. The weight of feeling powerless gnawed at my insides. Why was it so easy to point fingers when bravery was the only compass we needed in this moment? I caught the terrified glance of the child, whose eyes reflected the life-altering uncertainties we faced. "Let's not fight," I urged desperately, glancing between the man and the girl. "We need to focus on leaving, not dissecting blame." "Please!" My voice trembled, the fear threatening to banish the strength we'd begun to forge. But the man shook his head vehemently, his forehead glistened with sweat, but his resolve was unyielding. "If we can't rely on those in power to keep us safe, then what chance do any of us have?" The fear congealed with frustration, swirling around me in a dark cloud, threatening to suffocate the ember of hope that flickered within my heart. "We can choose to be here for each other," I said, almost pleadingly. "Look around. We may be scared, but we're all together, with no clear path leading to safety. The sound of groaning walls left echoes in our minds, twisted notes of uncertainty tugging at each decision. The moment felt as if time was tethered to the chaos itself, wrapping around us like the very debris threatening to crush our spirits. And then, another tremor hit, with an urgency that sent my heart into a frenzied rhythm, like war drums beckoning us forth into battle or perhaps beyond the brink of surrender. "Get down!" I shouted as dust filled the air in thick clouds, nearly choking us, as pieces of the structure around us began to crumble. Instinct took over. I pulled the child and the teenager down, smothering them from falling debris. My own body shook with the force of the shaking earth, my mind spiraling as the darkness churned in that confined space. In that moment, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps behind us. The resolute woman, having fought her way through the chaos, grasped hold of the elderly man, finally managing to free him from the tangle of rubble, her expression fierce and determined. "Help!" she cried to us, but before we could respond, a deafening crash resounded as another part of the ceiling broke away, a cacophony drowning out all reason. Someone yelled, "Run!" before it's too late. In a heartbeat, the clarity we were all searching for ebbed away, engulfed in chaos as people scrambled toward the exit, scrambling over one another, propelled by primal instinct to survive. But as I turned toward the light beckoning us, another scream rang out, this time from the woman. She had been forced to release the elderly man's hand as the frightened throng surged away, her eyes wide with fright as she reached for him. But the distance between them widened like an ocean of despair. "No! I can help you!" I shouted instinctively, as unfamiliar resolve pulled at my heart. I could feel the knot of panic tightening once more in my chest. Choices loomed like terrors that loomed beyond the visible world. But instead of running toward safety, I hesitated. I looked into the eyes of the child, into the resolute gaze of the teenage girl who had inspired me to push forward, and ultimately, toward the resolute woman who cried for help. The unspoken burden of first responders ran thick through those charged moments. Should I abandon hope or dare to save a life that might not be the one I was trying to preserve? Time threatened to vanish altogether as the chaos continued unabated around us, pulling it toward an edge of destruction, swaying the crowd into a frenzy. I felt strength leaving me as dread gripped my heart in a vice. Would I too become another victim of negligence? And then, as if the universe leaned in to listen, I felt an indescribable pulse of clarity within, one that drove me to take a leap into the unknown, despite the weight of despair clawing at my heart. I was resolute in that fragile embrace of hope that the flicker could survive in the dark. "Follow me," I shouted to the girl and the child, motioning toward the woman. "We need to help." But just before I could take a step forward, I glanced around the chaotic sea of desperate faces and spotted a familiar figure surging through the crowd, a figure that sent my heart plummeting. My heart raced as realized what I was seeing, the crushing emotion threatening to drown me in disbelief. My eyes met those of a person I had thought lost to an abyss of heartbreak long ago. And in that moment, everything shifted, a truth wrapping around me like the darkness closing in. Here was more at stake here than my own life. A revelation hung in the air, drawing us all together into a reckoning that was far from said and done. Panic surged within me as I locked eyes with the figure cutting through the chaos. It was Daniel, my brother, whom I had not seen in years. Time froze around us, the swirling madness falling to a whisper, as memories flooded my thoughts. Days spent laughing, fights over trivial matters, his always present grin now a shimmering mirage in the very real turmoil we found ourselves in. "Daniel!" I screamed, though I could barely hear my own voice over the cries and commotion. His expression was a mixture of shock and determination, as if he had come back to life just in time to save me from my nightmares. He locked onto my gaze, and for a moment, the screams faded into a backdrop, a soft halo around our shared memory. "I thought I had lost you," I continued, stepping toward him, but instinct pulled me back as debris rained down in snapping whispers around us. Get back! He shouted, fear obviously gripping him. The urgency melted away our childhood innocent laughter, replacing it with a grim understanding of our present reality. We have to get out of here. As the round of crashing and crackling intensified, I was torn between two worlds. The thread of hope still attached to the elderly man, and my brother, who now forged forward through the torrent, the gravitational pull of family demanding my loyalty even in the face of newfound responsibilities. Take the kids. I'll find the woman, I shouted, my voice barely cracking through the encumbering darkness. I turned to face the child, who looked up at me, wide-eyed and trembling. Trust me, I urged. The teenager, catching on to my desperate plan, nodded, though uncertainty rippled through her features. We need to stick together, she insisted, a plea woven into her words. Just go, I commanded, feeling more like a commander than a sibling. Each heartbeat rumbled like the chaos around us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that every second I waited might seal our fates. Daniel, I shouted again. Can you get them to safety? He nodded fervently, determination weaving through the despair shadowing his eyes. I'll keep them safe, I promise. But you don't you dare activate the Brotherly Rescue Act, Daniel. You know I can't leave until I try. With a swift motion, I pushed forward, tears stinging my eyes, blurring our shared reality. I momentarily lost sight of him and the children in the throng, but the woman remained my focus. Her cries ignited the flame of familiarity within me, a flicker of sisterhood igniting my purpose. Clambering over fallen debris, my heart raced as the echoes of groans and shouts morphed into an anguished cacophony of fear. Each breath felt like a tether to my resolve. I reached the woman just as another tremor rolled through the structure, and I steadied myself, placing a hand on her shoulder. Please! We have to move. The exit is that way. She looked up at me, her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. I can't leave him. The urgency pulsed through me. He wouldn't want you to give up. Please! Yet, the painful bond forged by anguish had taken root in her heart. He needs me. Her voice cracked, each word resonating like a hammer to my chest. Another crash reverberated, pulling us both into the clutches of desperation. I grabbed her hand, fierce and unwavering, desperate for her to see that strength could also come from letting go, allowing faith in the unknown. Trust me. Let me help you. The ground shook violently beneath us, and in that colossal section of disarray, I propelled her towards the light, a beacon of hope amidst a streaming darkness. She wavered, but I squeezed her hand with fierce conviction, leading her through the labyrinth of fear just as Daniel had done, for mere invisible ties binding us together in unexpected displays of courage. Like a magnet, the exit beckoned, drawing us closer with powerful resolve. The woman clutched at her heart's burden one last time, inhaling a deep shuddering breath, and finally, she nodded, leaning into the promise of survival. Okay, let's go. But just moments before we could break free, a colossal crash echoed, an eruption of noise that sliced through the air, sending shockwaves rippling. The ground split again, this time creating a fissure that threatened to engulf us whole. I could feel the tether loosening, the collective chance for safety flickering away as pieces from above surrendered to gravity. Run! I yelled, adrenaline burning through my veins. Now, we dashed toward the remnants of the exit, the glimmering light dangling tantalizingly, just within our grasp. Yet as we neared, another shadow appeared, racing toward us, a figure silhouetted against the beckoning brightness. It was Daniel, pushing a piece of debris aside, wrestling desperately through the noise. The air thickened, the sense of solidarity now layered with desperation. I reached out to him. We're coming! But as he turned, he stumbled, falling to the ground as a beam shifted precariously above him. My heart dropped into an abyss. A scream caught in my throat. Daniel! The words felt alien, mooring before I could even process. Hope shattered, piece by piece, our anchor unraveling. Would this be our reckoning after all? The crushing weight of grief loomed large within me, yet a small whisper of disbelief flickered against the ghost of despair in me, pushing me to think beyond loss toward an uncertain future. I couldn't let it end this way. Not like this. Fresh tears blurred my sight as I reached for the woman, reclaiming her strength even while my own began to falter. But even as fear eclipsed us all, I realized that even in this moment of disarray, we still had each other. We still had the fight for survival, and we wouldn't go down quietly. I had to act, everything around us drowning in a cacophony of chaos and desperation. The world felt both impossibly vast and confined, a stark reminder of how fragile connections could be, how quickly fear could dismantle even the strongest ties. "We need to go!" I shouted, urgency spilling from my lips. The woman's eyes were wild, reflecting the tumult that had become our shared reality, yet she remained trapped within her anguish. "Get away from him!" I screamed, willing the ground beneath me to stabilize, as I charged towards Daniel, who struggled to rise, the shadows of defeat pressing down on him. But in that fleeting moment, as the dust settled around us like a blanket, I felt something shift. I wasn't merely fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for love. The love that had once felt lost could ignite the flame of our collective resilience again. "Daniel! Listen to me," I yelled, forcing myself to focus, to extend the very thread of hope that bound us. "We're a family. No matter what happens, we're in this together." My voice cracked, but it felt like a lifeline amidst the surrounding despair. He blinked up at me, his eyes flickering between determination and uncertainty. "You shouldn't have come back," he replied, urgency lacing his voice. "You need to get out." "No!" I cried, feeling the desperation spike within my chest. "We're not leaving anyone behind. We can't lose each other again." With one fierce push, I rushed forward, reaching him just as he began to rise again. "Help me!" I extended my hand, and he grasped it with a strength that belied his fear. Together, we formed a united front, a collective will powerful enough to stave off the darkness. The woman, her own sorrow merging with our fervor, took a deep breath and joined me, steadying Daniel with her other hand. Around us, the scene was apocalyptic, yet in this small circle, hope flickered defiantly. Just as the echoes of shattering glass filled the air with ominous warnings, a burst of clarity emerged from chaos. Something deep within me ignited, the memory of all the moments we once shared, now tethered to the choices we faced together. I squeezed Daniel's hand, and he nodded, resolve shining anew in his eyes. We took a step forward, then another, weaving our way through the fleeing crowd. But as we moved, I could still feel the weight of hearts unspooled behind us, the elderly man, the teenage girl, and the child we had willingly decided to protect. "Stay close," I urged, turning back to face the wave of humanity, every strained expression a reminder that we were not alone in this struggle. The flickering glow of safety beckoned us onward, yet something broke inside me as I hesitated. "Come on, we can't lose anyone else." In a sudden wave of fierce clarity, I felt a deep surge of promise erupting from my core that I could pull this fragile circle tighter. I called out in the hushed eye of the chaos, "Anyone who can hear me, don't stop. We're not giving up." And for an instant, it felt as if every pulse of my heart synchronized with a distant heartbeat, a symphony of longing and survival. People surged forward, drawn by a thread of hope, every outstretched hand reconnecting us together. And then I saw a hair, an elderly woman, frail and crumpled, trying to push through the terrified mass. Clarity struck hard. I had to help her. I couldn't just be a witness to the unraveling. I had to be part of something larger. I turned suddenly, and before I could think, I darted back toward her, ready to pull her to safety. "Please, let me help you," I said urgently, as she looked up, her frail hand trembling in worry. The sound of crumbling walls echoed behind us. "Just hold on." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. feeling the weight of her stories and dreams collide with the terror swirling in the air around us. With every ounce of strength, I guided her forward, just as Daniel and the woman followed closely behind. They pushed through the crowd, clinging to each other, their faces a mix of fear and gratitude that propelled us nearer to the light. The closer we got to freedom, the more clarity emerged from within the madness. We were no longer isolated souls, but a tapestry woven of shared experiences, vulnerabilities, and resilience. Stay together, I urged, my voice filled with the weight of purpose, as we wove our way through the last remnants of the terrified masses. And then, in an instant, the world shifted as bells rang through the darkness, signaling safety just beyond the clutches of despair. Light flooded our path, blinding yet beautiful, as it revealed the exit we had fought so hard to reach. Each step felt like reclaiming pieces of my past, the laughter of childhood, the bonds of family, the warmth of love. In a breathless surge of relief, I bolted into the light of fresh air and clear skies, pulling the elderly woman and my brother behind me as I inhaled the scent of freedom. I turned, taking in the faces around us, very soul once trapped, now freed. The darkness behind us slowly receding, memories blending into resilience. And then, amidst the joyous escape, I turned to Daniel, tears filling my eyes. We made it. My heart swelled, recognizing how unity had reclaimed our lost fragments through the chaos. As I looked around at those who had run with us, I felt a sense of belonging, an electric pulse of shared hope flickering against the residue of fear. The emotional landscape shifted beneath our feet, and in that moment a beautiful reckoning could breathe again. And then I turned back to Daniel, the shadow of fear lifting, and I realized something else. The heart of what truly mattered was right there, the hope we had forged, the love we chose to fight for, and the undeniable strength shared between us. With a profound sigh, as the sun broke free from the clouds above, I whispered my truth, an unabashed promise resolutely delivered. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Always. It was a vow born from loss, but intended for healing, a promise that became a bridge across the tenacity of fear, carving a new path forward, one filled with the light of our empathy, connectedness, and undying love. Together. We would always be together.